Do any of you feel like you have an obligation as a mature adult to make sense to your children? Raise your hand if you ever feel that way. Yeah, you better get over that real quick because it's going to cause problems for you. This lady, oh, I loved her. She was such a sweetheart. Lived right next door. Her name was Jane. And she comes running across the cul-de-sac one day, and she's already about 80 years old. She's got this book that we'd written. She's waving it over her head, and she's giving me the business. She said, "Our pa used this before you ever came up with it." And I said, "Jane, are you serious?" And she said, "Yeah, our pa back on the farm. She used this before you ever wrote about it." I said, "Really?" She said, "Oh, yeah, we used to argue with our pa." "Really?" She said, "Oh, yeah, we used to say stuff like, 'Well, Pa, we politely disagree with you about that.'" Major arguing on the farm 70 years ago. Have things changed a little bit? So I said, "You said that to your father?" And she said, "Oh, yeah, me and my brother, we were tough ones." I said, "Well, what did your pa do?" "Well, he'd smile." Now, why do you smile at a misbehaving kid? Confuses the heck out of them. And I don't know about you, but I found that the more confused the kids are, the easier they are to deal with. He'd smile? Oh, yeah, he'd smile at us. Well, what would he say? Well, he'd just look at us and say, "Well, sweet Jane, Robert, no time for making kitten britches." I said, "What?" She said, "Well, he'd just say no time for making kitten britches." I said, "Cat pants?" She says, "Yeah, kitten britches." I said, "That's weird." And she says, "I know. And the worst thing that happened was that as soon as I had youngins on my own, that started coming out of my mouth." And she said, "I had to call up my pa and figure out what it meant." I said, "Pa, you remember when you used to say no time for making kitten britches?" Now here's Pa. Brilliant guy. You know why? Well, you ever notice that the most brilliant people you run into have very limited vocabulary? "Pa, you remember when you used to say no time for making kitten britches?" "Uh-huh." "Well, what's it mean?" "Oh." "Well, why'd you say it?" And Pa got to show how brilliant he really was. He said, "Well, sweet Jane, I just got to figuring that when a kid says something that ain't so bright, y'all just match it up." Is there a lot of wisdom in that, right? Now, do we gain respect from our kids by trying to counter every single one of their debates or arguments with some brilliant parental wisdom? Or do we gain that respect by proving to them that we can set and enforce limits without getting angry and without giving in? What are your thoughts about that? Yeah, thank you.